Hey winners, welcome to this week's lesson. A couple weeks ago, we talked about, I'm going to adjust this a little bit because it's going to drive me crazy. There we go. A couple weeks ago, we talked about four principles, four responsibilities that you have to yourself if you really want to be a top performer, if you want to hit those goals that, those stretch goals that you've dreamed of getting. And so those four principles, those four responsibilities that we talked about were activity, attitude, control, and repeat. And so 2 weeks ago, we kind of went down the road of activity, and I talked to you about the importance of activity and understanding your activity and having it not only be a lot of activity, but being the right activities. And we're going to keep going down that road next week, where we're going to time block, and I'm going to give you a tool for tracking your numbers. For this week, we're going to go back to the second principle, which is attitude. And we have to understand that our attitude toward anything is based on our perspective, and our perspective is based on our experiences and our education, right? We've been doing a ton of work on mindset, and we've been talking about changing what we believe about things and changing how we see things so that we could become more productive. And what we chose to do for a living is very difficult, and we don't get daily gratification. We don't sell something every day. We don't even make progress on some days. And so it's very important that we understand that our attitude is going to play a key role in our productivity. And we have to control that. We have to be the ones that drive that recognize it. And so your worksheet's going to have a couple of activities for you guys to really look at. What are the things that trigger this negative attitude in me? What are some triggers, right? What are some things that cause me to have a bad attitude or have a low attitude, not a high attitude, right? Because we know that when we come out of a closing, our attitude is super high and we feel like we're on top of the world and we feel like we're ready to do anything. And if we had to make cold calls then, or if we had to do something that required a little bit of effort, we would be so ready for it and our energy would be so positive that we'd be successful at it. But the other thing happens too, and maybe it's raining and the kids are sick and you have a flat tire and you don't have a closing and you can't get a hold of the people that you're trying to get a hold of. How does that affect our attitude? And when it does, what do we do about it, which is more important? So when we look at how everything's connected, I promise you that I've done studies, and I know this, that your attitude is going to have a very, very large effect on your activity. So when we talk about these four foundations, these four principles, these four responsibilities that you have to your success, we have to understand that they're all connected. And we talked a lot about activity and needing the right activity, right? And we know that we need to go out and we need to meet 3 people every single day. We need to connect with new people every single day. And we need to call past clients and we need to ask for referrals and see if we can generate the business from there. And maybe we're putting a Facebook Live on. Well, none of those things are as effective as they could be if our attitude isn't in the right place, if we don't have a high attitude, because people aren't going to be attracted to you if you have a negative attitude. And even if you think you're trying to fake your way through it, in most cases, they can still read your body language and they can still get the feeling that you're not quite right. And so we have to just understand that everything's connected, first off. But second off, that our attitude has to be as high as possible, as often as possible. And we are in charge of that. Like, it's not my job, it's not your boss's job, it's not your husband's job, it's not your wife's job. We have to own our attitude. And one of the first things that we need to do when we own our attitude, when we talk about attitude, is we have to understand what the triggers are, okay? Because most cases, we don't just wake up and decide we're going to be in a bad mood, we're going to be in a sad mood, or we're going to be in a frustrated mood. There are triggers for that stuff. And when we recognize the triggers, then we can understand that when that trigger happens, our attitude's going to be affected. And if we know that our attitude's affected, then we can understand the things that we need to do to turn that upside down, right? To go from bad attitude up to good attitude and flip that. Because we want to make sure that when we are public facing, whether it's live, whether it's on Facebook, whatever it may be, when we're public facing, we have to understand that it's our responsibility to control that attitude. And so, number one, we understand the triggers. And number two, we have to understand what to do when we recognize the triggers. And so we've talked a little bit about the triggers so far. Now let's talk about how do we deal with our bad attitude or a sad attitude or a frustrated attitude when we get that, right? Because it's going to happen. It will happen 100% of the time. And I don't have an answer for everyone because each of us handles those things differently. I will tell you a couple of probably basic things that do work is that you really have to just take a step back, okay? There's a saying that you see going around and it says, if it won't matter 5 years from now, don't spend more than 5 minutes on it. And it's okay to feel frustrated, but once you get that frustration, you have to flush it and you have to move it out of the way. So feel it. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel sad. Go ahead and feel it. But once you feel it, you have to move it aside. One way that a technique that I used in the past that has been successful for some people that I've worked with is I tell them to imagine that you're a bird or that you're in an aircraft, and we're in the middle of this frustration or this sadness or this anger or whatever that negative attitude is, and we're in the middle of it and we can feel it, right? Pretend you're a bird and you can just fly up and fly up. And as you fly up, you can see the room, and then you can see the building, and then you can see the block, and then you can see the city, and then you can see the state. And you'll understand that it puts it in perspective. That whatever this frustration is, when you're at 50,000 feet, isn't really that big a deal because there's a whole world of things going on around you, and it doesn't affect any of those. And so sometimes we magnify what this frustration is. We magnify this sadness. And there are times we're going to be very sad, and those might take for more extreme measures. But right now what we're really talking about is we're just talking about the day-to-day frustration, sadness, anger, whatever that negative attitude might be. And generally it's one or two small things that when we take the big view just don't matter all that much. They don't affect us all that much unless we let them. Anger, frustration, sadness has no power over us unless we give it power. And so I would tell you that's one technique you can use. It's fly up. Just be a bird and fly up to 50,000 feet and look down and realize that there's a whole other stuff going on. A whole lot of other stuff going on. And that frustration really probably doesn't affect very much of it. It certainly doesn't affect your customers unless there's a problem with closing or something, which we understand. But that's going to happen. We know that's part of the business. We know those things are going to happen. And then all you can do is you can communicate with your client and let them know that you're working on it and you understand that they're frustrated too, right? Because you need to be the confidence factor for them. If something goes wrong during the process and you show frustration and you show anger, your customer is going to go through the roof because they're expecting you to fix everything. They're expecting you to be the solution. And so you have to understand this is how everything's connected and why the attitude is so important, not only in meeting people, but even throughout the process, because their happiness with you throughout that process is going to affect the referral base that they give you. And the referral base that they give you is going to be strengthened when they have this confidence that your attitude is just so high, even when there's a little bit of adversity, even when there's a problem. You're going to get them through it and they're going to have confidence in you. Another technique is to just breathe and do gratitudes. I know that works for a ton of people, and just say, okay, I know that this is a frustration right now. I know that this is a sadness right now. But here's all of the things that I have to be grateful for. And then when you look at this long list of things that you have to be grateful for, this little moment of anger, this moment of frustration really doesn't affect your life that much. And so you're able to just push it aside. You may have your own technique for calming down. Some people I know like to visualize the new outcome. Some people like to visualize sitting on a beach and listening to the ocean waves. Some people will actually put that on and listen to ocean waves and birds chirping and just close their eyes and take a moment and just calm down. So whatever that is, just remember that we have to understand what the triggers are. And when we understand the triggers, we have to flip the attitude, because the attitude is 100% our responsibility. you will never produce positive results with a negative attitude. And so it's critically important that we pay attention to that. And as we've gone through the transformation of our limiting beliefs, one of the things that we do is we start talking about this language that we use, right? The internal dialogue, how we're never ever going to say, I am so frustrated. Because if we just change a little bit of words, what we can do is we can take and we can reduce the emotional impact that that has, right? If I say, I am so frustrated, I am so angry, I'm seeing red, the emotional intensity that's involved with that is very high. If we respond to that same situation and say, wow, I'm a little peeved, I'm a little ticked off, the emotional intensity goes down. And so that's why when we work on all of this type of communication, internal communication, external communication, those words that we use are very, very important because they will have a direct impact on our attitude. And that's why I'm so careful and why we spend so much time day after day after day reviewing all of that stuff, because we have to understand that every word that comes out of our mouth is either going to strengthen a positive attitude or strengthen a negative. And we have to make sure that we're strengthening the right side of that. And so words are important, and your dialogue is important, and your dialogue internally and externally is critical to you controlling your attitude. It is our job to inspire. When we have people make decisions, when we help people through the process, it's because they feel inspired to make that decision. The more inspiring you are, the more likely that decision is to come out in your favor. Well, you will never be inspiring with a poor attitude. And so just make sure that you do a little mental checklist before you talk to somebody, before you pick up that phone, before you walk into the house or the business or wherever you're meeting your potential client or a current client. You just take a little mental note and you say, okay, where am I at? Scale of 1 to 10, where's my attitude right now? And if it's not an 8 or better, what am I going to do to get it higher? What do I need to erase, right? Where do I need to go and take my 50,000 foot view, or do I need to go to a beach and visualize the calming waves? What do I need to do to get my attitude up to an 8 or better, preferably a 10, right? Because I want to walk in there and I want to be inspiring. You know, I train a lot in different industries, and one of the things that I always tell people is, especially, you know, when we're meeting with our clients and our prospective clients, is be the best experience they had that day. It's always my goal that when somebody's done talking to me or when somebody spends time with me, that when they walk away from that interaction, it's memorable and it's the best experience they had that day. Because they're going to have their own frustrations, and they're going to have other people dumping frustrations from the outside onto them, and they're going to have people angry with them, and they're going to have people cut them off in traffic. And what I want to do is I want to stand out, and I want to be so far above everybody else that they dealt with that day. And I'm going to do that by having a great attitude and using power language, right? Using words like amazing and awesome, like we've been practicing. And this will have an impact if you trust the process. So the keys for this week are really understanding we're still working on those 4 responsibilities: activity, attitude, control, repeat. This is the second of those 2 responsibilities, and we're talking about the attitude portion of it. Attitude is critical to your success. You will never ever get exponentially better results. You will never double your sales with a poor attitude. And so we have to put a lot of effort into recognizing poor attitude and flipping it. Right? So I give you some techniques, practice each one of them, see if you like it. Your worksheet's going to have a little exercise on attitude too. And I really, really am excited for you guys to start working on this and getting a better attitude, start communicating in a more positive way, because that really, when we start doing those things, you're going to see the pipeline start to fill up. And that pipeline is really the first and biggest step that we take to doubling our sales. So I thank you guys for bearing with me this week. Activity, attitude, control, repeat. Those are your 4 responsibilities. We're on the second responsibility of attitude. Control your attitude. Know your triggers. Find a way to overcome them and have a great attitude. When you do that, you're going to be happier even when you're not selling stuff. But I love working with you guys. I look forward to seeing you again this week. You'll see another video tomorrow morning. And we have a couple live meetings coming up with some groups this week. So I'm excited to see you guys in person. We'll get caught up on any questions that you have then. If not, you are always welcome to email me, mj@maptosales.com, Text or call 480-436-1820. Have a great, great week.